Hang in there is all I can say. All right, so back in Capture One, where things are at right now. We've gotten through the session part pretty well. We've gotten through albums. We've gotten through subfolders, or session favorites as they call it. We got through the whole system folder. We've gotten through filters. We've gotten through all of that part there and all of that. Are there any questions before we move on about any of this stuff so far? Are you guys feeling good about this stuff? I'm telling you, this can make such an incredible difference in your life. Really stick with this. Work with it. Try to remember it. Watch the videos again. If you can really nail this down, it is just, it's so hard for me to say this, but I do. I say it with all conviction. You are guaranteed a job. Maybe not in the city you want to be in, but how many classes are you in where somebody can actually say that to you? I mean, that is just like, if I was in your shoes, how many of you guys are graduating this year, this semester? A lot of you, right? If not all of you, right? So it's kind of important right now, but come May, it's going to be critical, right? So anyway, so that's a good thing. It makes me feel good. Hopefully you guys should feel good. Again, I keep trying to sell the incentive to really, struggle it out with this, because I realize that what we're really talking about here is learning essentially an entire software program. So anyway, with that said, back in Capture One at the library. So we're going to look at the catalog function of Capture One really quickly. We're not going to spend a lot of time here, but I want to have a quick conversation about that, and I want to show you the way that the only people that I know who actually use the catalog program in Capture One, the way they actually work with it. And it's really more of a hybrid situation between catalogs and sessions. And so that's what I'm going to show you how to build here. However, in the course of doing it, if you end up working for somebody or even for yourself and you're only interested in doing supporting a catalog workflow, that's fine. The information that we're going to go through right here will function for that as well. So you do not have to do this hybrid system. You could be a catalog only person, or you can be a sessions only person, or you can be the hybrid person in all of this. So a catalog in Capture One functions in very much the same way as Lightroom does in the rest of the world. What it's really designed to do is, unlike sessions, which are really, the way I think about sessions is I think about them as being job specific. You build a session for one job. Now, a lot of times, and you'll notice in here, in the naming convention that I've used, or the one that we built, this is the one that we built for last week, but even if I was doing the one for today, if I was doing the exact same job tomorrow, I would stay in the session that was built for today. I would not build a brand new one for tomorrow. And then if I'm on a 5-day shoot and it's all the same project, it all goes into the folder, the whole session that was built from day one, unless I've got somebody compelling me a reason to actually make that change. Because again, I'm looking to streamline my organization. So if I've got a single job, it should have a single name. I take that name from the very first day of the job, but that doesn't mean that it can't encompass or function with days that are not that specific calendar day. Make sense? All right. So with that in mind, catalogs work, again, very much like Lightroom works. And in the catalog situation, what happens is that the whole idea of sessions is blown out the window. You don't have sessions in there. They don't work like that, whatever. A catalog is designed primarily as a database. And what happens in that catalog is that everything is imported into the catalog. So instead of having a capture folder and a bunch of different folders and then session folders that are all unique and that kind of stuff, whatever, it is this one gigantic dumping ground. And it takes all of the images in. It takes everything in. However, the database functions inside that catalog are better than they are probably anywhere else. One of the disadvantages to doing sessions is that if you want to actually search for a particular file, you have to do it session by session by session. You have to open each session individually. So if you, say, shot something 5 years ago and you don't remember what week it was. Let's say you worked for this very same client for all of September. You were working for the same client, so you had 4 or 5 sessions from that, and they were all the same kind of stuff, whatever. And you don't really remember which of those 4 or 5 sessions it was in. You have to open each one of those individually, and you have to search each one of them individually for the image that you're looking for. If it was all in a catalog, all of those images would be in one catalog, and you would simply search for the image and you could find it right away. So it's just how people work, how you want to work yourself, how the clients that you're working for want to work. It's just a question of how all of that happens. So the reason that we talk about doing the hybrid thing is to circumvent that very problem. In doing a hybrid situation, you have both sessions and catalogs. You shoot into sessions just like we've been talking about here all along. But then at the end of the day, you import all of your session captures into one giant catalog, and that way you can search your giant catalog easier, but all of your files are still stored in your sessions. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so I'll show you how to do exactly that. So for us, we need to actually build a catalog. So if you come into the library again, click on that little plus down button. Instead of new session, you want to click on new catalog. And in my new catalog, I'm going to call mine, again, this is not going to be job specific now because this is going to hold all of your work. So I'm just going to call this Verser's catalog. You would name it after yourself or after your client, or in most cases, you would simply be opening a catalog that somebody had already built or that somebody already had. Because again, the idea behind this is that this catalog is where you would be working today, tomorrow, next year, the year after, 10 years later, would still always be working in this one single catalog. So at any rate, I'm going to call mine SCR catalog. I am going to do mine not on my shared partition, but in my TOS partition. Restart. No, try to just restart Capture One and see if that takes care of it. If not, you're going to have to restart the computer. You good? All right. Again, like everything that we've talked about here before, you do not want to actually do this in an open, you do not want to open a new window on this and simply say OK to that. And when you do that and you look over at the side over here now on the library side, you see that things have actually gotten remarkably pared down. And what you'll also notice in here that you have catalog collections. Again, these are pre-built for you, so this will have recent imports, recent captures. You can shoot tethered to a catalog. That part of that would not function any different than it does to a session, so you can go straight into that. We do not have any user collections right now. We actually will get to those in just a second, and we don't have, yes? Okay, well, you didn't want to use catalogs anyway. I'm going to show you this still on my screen, so just watch my screen. We'll go through this, and then I will probably save setting up an import for something else. So hang on one second. So it just crashes, right? Okay. Okay, you can go ahead and restart it. We won't build a catalog with you guys, but we will build one. I will show you the one that I'm going to build here and basically how this whole thing would work. So in this case, you need to get images into the catalog. Like I said, you can actually shoot tethered into it, but in most cases, you would import images into it, which is what I'm going to do right now. There's a big import button right here, but you'll also notice under the File menu, there's also an Import Images that exists right here. This also functions exactly the same in Sessions. You can import images into a session. As a matter of fact, a lot of photographers, myself included, when I'm actually out on the street and I'm shooting, and we're doing a lot of motion, so I'm running down the street and I'm chasing somebody, or places where it's not really convenient for me to be tethered, I actually will shoot to card, and then we will import the cards into a computer. So it's a way to actually be able to do both. So again, I would still always be importing my images to a computer that I had on site so that I could immediately check the work to make sure that I was getting captures, that things were in focus, that things were exposed correctly, all the above. So at any rate, so I'm going to click on import images here. A dialog box actually opens up, and it's interesting. It's found actually in my compact flash import card that I was talking to you guys about earlier. I'm going to see if I can't make this seem a little bit. No, I can't. I always think that it's bad design here. It's really hard for me. I don't know about you guys. It's really hard for me to tell where the import window is different from the window that's actually behind it because of the UI is like identical. I think that that's just really poor design. I think if you have a black background that would be for your working interface for Capture One, that the import window should be gray, or there should be a distinction between the two, and there really isn't. But at any rate, so we're going to go through this from the beginning. You guys have this actually on your desktop as well. There was simply a folder that I created that had raw images in it that I called Compact Flash Imitation because I didn't want to ask you guys to bring a card reader and a compact flash card that had images on it. So we're playing make-believe here. But at any rate, that's what this guy is right here. If you had a compact flash or a situation, not a compact flash, let's say you had a computer that had 100 sessions on it already. You could import all of those at once by simply clicking on this include subfolders. So all that means is that it with this include subfolder is it will look for every single capture that exists within whatever you've actually flagged here to import from. So if you had an external hard drive that had a whole bunch of sessions on it, you would plug your external hard drive in, you would actually click choose folder from your source, and you would pick the source. So for instance, in my case, I would pick, well, I'll just say this hard drive right here, and I could say open this hard drive right here, and then any session that was on there, it would actually pick the subfolder from that. But I don't want to confuse this program, so I'm hitting cancel out of that. Does this make sense going on here? Okay, the next thing down is critical, and it's its destination. So if you click on this drop down, you have 3 options here, only 2 of which are really important. The first is current location. If you're going to do this hybrid programming that I would actually suggest that you do if you're going to work with catalogs, what you would want to do is you would actually do your typical regular shooting to a session. That would never change. However, if you wanted a reference of that, though, then in your giant catalog, so that it was easier to search for those images, you would say to leave the raw captures in their current location. You want those raw captures to stay inside the session folders that you created. You don't want to pull those things out. If you pull them out, you have destroyed your whole session structure. The catalog will work fine, but all of your captures, well, none of your captures will be inside of your sessions any longer. You will have brought them all here inside the catalog, which is this option right here. Now, there are people who do not use sessions ever, and if you're that kind of person, then your import would actually be inside this catalog. Finally, you can actually choose a different folder altogether. I don't see any reason that you would want to actually do that. And what this is basically saying is it would allow you to move your capture files out of your session folder, not into your catalog, but to somewhere else. That just seems to be a world of confusion to me. So I'm going to leave mine at current location because, again, I work in a hybrid environment if I do anything. I want my captures to stay in the capture folder. This backup to is where you can actually do a copy of your file. If you click on Enable Backup, it will actually say this would be a location to do it to. I cannot strongly recommend enough not doing this here. The problem with this is that it will make a copy of what you've imported. It'll make a copy of your raw files somewhere else. However, that is not a legitimate backup. A legitimate backup is backing up either your entire session or your entire catalog. What this says when you click on it is that you only want to back up your raw captures. That is not viable to me, so I do not do it here. We will talk about backing up in this class in a big way as we get towards the end of the class. But there are much better ways to do structured backing up that really protects you, and this is not it. So I not only suggest that you don't do it here in Capture One, I have the exact same advice for people who do it, because this option exists in Lightroom as well, and I think it is a huge mistake. I wish there was a way to actually edit this the same way there is a way to edit tools, and that you could get rid of this, because it shouldn't be there. And it says here that naming is disabled when sorting files in the current location. So it's not going to actually do the import part here. It's not going to change my naming here. However, I can change the naming once I get stuff in. So I'm not going to worry about this part right now. The metadata, I actually do believe that you guys should have copyright on this. To build a copyright, again, it's a very simple metadata situation that exists here. There's not a lot that can actually be brought in here. However, and we will talk about this. Somebody write this down for me really quickly, because there are people who want to do much, much more advanced metadata tagging when they import or when they do something like that. And the metadata tagging that exists in this import, and it's also the same one when you're actually in the session version of Capture One, is very limited. It gives you a copyright and a description. That's all it actually gives you. However, we can build a style that is a metadata style that can include anything you want. And then what we would do we would actually pick that style down here in adjustments. You'll see down here I've actually got a metadata style that I can use. And I will show you, I don't want to get into this tonight because we're not going to get into building styles tonight, but you can build a metadata style that has an enormous amount of information in it. And instead of using this metadata copywriting right here, you would actually do it with a style adjustment that's right down here. But in our case, I'm going to show you how to build this one here really quickly to get just a simple copyright one, which at the very least is something you would want to do. You click on the little 3 dots right here. I take that back. You click on this guy, and you simply type it in. The copyright symbol on a computer is Option G. Gives you the copyright symbol, and then again you would type in your name. Uh, 2019, and then you could throw in a quick description of this. The next thing down, again, if you wanted to apply a style, I would do a copyright style in here, but other than that, I don't really want to apply styles in here. You would not want to do auto adjust. Auto adjust will go in and look at all of these files that we're importing, and it'll try to white balance them and adjust their exposure. 2 things that you should not be doing on import. You should be doing that individually on your own. But then this include existing adjustments, and the advantage to this is that if we are bringing this in from a session, just like the session that we've already been working at, and we've done star ratings, and we've done color tagging, and when we've done white balancing, and we may have even done some other adjustments, whatever, you want all of that information brought into the catalog. Why on earth would you want to do it again? So you definitely want to click on this include existing adjustments. And then in this case, you could actually click on import all, or if you simply click a selection of images. So you'll see I just selected a single image, and you can see that this is changed to import 1 image. You can hold down the shift key and select a group of images, and it'll say import 7 images here, whatever. Or again, you can go back to Command A to select everything, and this will actually be tagged as import 26 images. But in my case, I'm only going to click on 2 of these so that this happens really fast. And then the last thing down here, which we don't really have, but 2 options that we've actually got here, 3 options, I take that back. The first is this one right here in this drop-down menu. What happens when the import is over? So you have options here. If you look at this, if you put on here, never import collection, never open import collection, what will happen is that it will import the images into your catalog and do nothing else. You won't see a thing, but they'll be there. The next option down is that notify me when done. So what happens there is it will do all the importing, and then the minute it's done, your computer will ding and a dialog will pop up saying that your import is done, but you will still not be in your catalog. And then finally, the last one down, open collection when the import starts. It will actually open things up, and you will see the images actually populate in, and then you will actually be inside of your catalog, inside of your collection, ready to do whatever you want to do. The options that I don't have here, because I'm not actually doing this with a card, are these last 2 that are right down here. Eject card, you definitely want that turned on, because what happens then, and you see this happen, I have a good friend who is a DigitalTech for Lollapalooza, And she's one of like 15 or 20 DigitalTechs that actually works that music show. It's insane. They have 100 photographers shooting it, 200 photographers shooting it, and all the DigitalTechs sit in this tent and they process all day long. And so there are runners that are constantly coming in, handing them handfuls of cards. Here, this is from blah, blah, blah. Here, this is from blah, blah, blah. This is from blah, blah. And it's their job to actually load these things in, to keep it all structured in order, to keep the photographers separate, to keep all the copyrights in. Anyway, it's a lot. So at any rate, but if you click on this eject card, the advantage to it is that the very second the last of your imports is done, the card ejects from your reader and you know that your import has happened. So it's a signal. It's a visual signal and a noise. You pull the card out and you throw the next one in. There's no way to do it any faster. However, the next one over there, erase images after copying, is one that you want to avoid doing. You don't ever want to do this. The reason you don't want to do this is twofold. The first reason is that as long as those images are still on the card, you have a backup. You've copied it into your catalog, but they're still sitting on your card, so you've got a copy. That's a safety. Now, that may not last, but as long as it does, that is a safety. The second thing you never, ever, ever want to do is this thing that says erase images after copying will reformat your card based on your computer. So if you're hooked up to a Macintosh, it will format your card based on a Macintosh. If you're hooked up to a PC, it will format it based on a PC. The problem with this is that formatting cards is specific to a camera model. And when I say model, I mean model. So for instance, how many people in here who have more than one? How many have? Okay, I'm just going to tell you me. I have more than one camera. I have two Canons that I shoot with. One is a 5D Mark III, one is a 5D Mark IV. The formatting for the 5D Mark III will not function 100%ly in the Mark IV. It may appear like it's working. It may work. It may not work. Only thing I can tell you is that you always want to format your card in your camera, never, ever, ever anywhere else. Because that formatting does not translate. God forbid you do it from one camera to another. It won't recognize the card. So most people will, again, I would never mix my Mark III cards with my Mark IV cards. I would reformat them completely separately. Now, for me, whenever I am shooting to card, I actually format my cards the second before I need to start using it. So if I've got 10 cards, I put one in, I format it, and then I'm on to the next. I shoot. I don't do all 10 at one time. I don't do anything like that, whatever. Because again, whatever's on those cards is a backup and a safety for me until I format the card. Does this make sense? All right, so then I'm going to go ahead and click on Import To, and you'll see that both of the images get imported. And over here on the other side, this is the whole database beginning part that happens right here. You can see that there's a timestamp for mine that goes under Recent Imports. And again, if I was shooting tethered, it would be here under Recent Captures. But this is where it keeps the information of what I'm actually, so that I'm able to actually search things in here. So this is the beginning of the database right here. As we go down further into the user collection, this is the next place that we actually need to look at, because this is the next structuring that you would do typically for somebody to try to, again, tag this information in such a way that you could actually then make it sortable. So in the sortable part right here, and unfortunately they don't do this, I think, in the order that it should be done in. They do it in Album, Smart Album, Project, and Group. And in this, Album and Smart Album are exactly the same as they are in the Sessions part of this. Albums are stupid, Smart Albums are smart, they're based on criteria. You have color ratings in here, you have star ratings in here, you've got all of that kind of stuff still exists in here. You can build smart albums, you can build stupid albums, you can do all that. But to help facilitate this, because again, this is a collection, this is a world, total universe collection of all of your images, to help give it more structure and organization, to try to make it a little bit easier for you, they have these two other things down here that are called Project and Group. And to show you what those really are, you want to select Project first. Project always comes first. So I personally don't understand why they don't make this. Again, Why they call it a collection here and a project here, I don't know. I think that the wording in that could actually be a little bit more consistent, but it isn't. So at any rate, I'm going to click on project, and you'll see when project comes up, I'm going to actually I'm naming this. I would name this after, let's say I'm shooting this for Neiman's. So all the work that I ever shot for Neiman's would actually go into this collection right here. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And you can see that Neiman's is actually a collection that has actually been built. Now, I don't have anything in there because I didn't say I wanted to put those images in there. However, you can click on your images here, and you can drag them over here into your Neiman's collection. No, you can't. So you need to actually add to this. So in your Neiman's collection, I'm actually going to go back up here to the top. And I'm going to add another thing to this. And what I'm going to add to this is going to be an album. And my album here, I'm going to call this Captures. No, let's not call it Captures. Let's call it Pics. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to Pics. Then I can go to all of my images, and I can drag these into Pics. And it actually stays right there. I can also tag one of these images. So I'm actually going to do a 5-star up here, and I'm going to do a quick smart album. So I've got a regular album here that's called Pics. In my smart album right here, this click down again, as you've still got presets, I'm going to do 5 stars, and I'm going to say OK to that. And I'm going to call it 5 stars. And here's my 5 stars right here. And again, I've got a single image in here because it looked at the ratings that I had done. It picked out the 5-star image that I've actually got here. However, people will actually do these things, and they will end up with a huge amount of structure in this. So you can click on these guys, and you can drag and drop them into Neiman's. And then when you click on Neiman's, it's actually here. But let's say you had a huge amount to sort from here, and it wasn't just 5-star ratings, but you also wanted to do another smart album that was March only, that was date stamped, or that you wanted to, so let's say you ended up with 30 smart albums in here. It starts to get confusing. And so in a way to give it more structure, you can add what are called groups. And so when you click on a group here, what one of the examples of this would be, I'm going to call this group my smart albums. And say OK to that. And then I'm going to actually create another group. And I'm going to call it stupid albums. You can actually then take all of your sessions. So let's say I take let's say I've got 10 smart albums. You can drag this into your smart albums. And all your stupid albums, you've got 10 of those too, and you can bring them into your stupid ones. Then all of this is sitting nested inside of this. All your smart albums will be in here. All of your stupid albums will actually be in here. It's simply a way to give you more folder structure organization. Does that make sense? But it's all mechanical. All of this is, again, it's just a way to try to help make this life for you that most people say you don't want to get into. Now, the conventional wisdom on the street is that Lightroom is a far superior cataloging software than the catalog here in Capture One. I know nobody who uses this. That sounds fun, right? Are there questions about this? Okay, so catalogs and sessions can coexist in Lightroom at the same time. You don't have to quit Lightroom Capture One. You don't have to quit Capture One to go back and forth between them. So for instance, I can go simply right back to where I was, to a session that we were in before, and I go right out of my catalog and I go right into my session, and everything is good to go. And I'm back where you guys should be. Are we good on this? All right. Restart again. Okay, so what I'd like to do is actually go to the folder that let's do this. Let's go to the folder that we created for today. So again, it's going to be that session 20 190304. It should be the blank one, but it's the one that actually has got the session subfolders, or in the term that they use here, session favorites. And you should have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Has everybody still got that part? We good on that? Okay, we are going to do an import into this. Take that back. Let's hold off on that import. Guys, remind me, we're actually going to shoot some stuff. Let's do the import. Let's do the import part. Okay, so go ahead and actually select your session. So again, it would be our subfolder 01. Make sure that it's got that little capture icon that's actually right next to it. That's the designation that this is going to be our capture folder. Come up to the File menu and come down to Import Images, and a dialog will open up looking very much like the one that I had before. And then you guys need to navigate to the folder that we actually were just that you should have copied over, that was called Compact Flash Card Imitation. To actually navigate to there, you can actually click on this drop-down menu and say you want to choose folder. And in the choose folder, you just need to navigate. It should be sitting on your desktop. That's where I told most people to put theirs. I've got mine that's actually sitting in my pictures folder right here. And I'm going to go ahead and say open. And your screen should populate like this. Again, we talked about this before, including subfolders. If in this case it doesn't matter because there isn't a subfolder, but that again, you should go ahead and check this anyway. It'll find any capture that exists in the anything that's underneath the hierarchy of this route that we're actually picking right here. The destination here, we are going to leave it into the capture folder, and it is this capture folder right here as a check. And this is a good habit to get into as a DigitalTech, because people can do weird they can do weird designations. Somebody can actually set a capture folder and you don't know they did it. And so then you're not really sure what capture folder really is, because again, they're all just called capture folder. So as a quick check, that's what this little arrow is. If you click on this little arrow that's sitting right here, you don't have to click on it. If you simply hover over it, it will actually take you to where it is. And you'll see in my case, this is not the version that I had in my pictures folder. So this is actually the wrong one right now. This would not be going in to the folder that's in this session that I'm building right here, I don't think. So anyway, if you click on that arrow, it will take you out in the Finder to it. It's just a good way to confirm. And now I can see, yes, indeed, this is on my shared partition. It is going in to the session that we made for today in capture folder, but in that session 01, because that's what I've got designated as my capture folder. So that part is all correct. It'll actually show you the path to that right down here. This space left, this is a critical one, because again, this is the people run into this problem all the time, is they'll actually start an import and they do not have enough space to actually do the import. And what that will cause is your system to crash. So if, let's say, you're importing a typical shooting for you guys, a single shot or a day is probably in the neighborhood of 2 gigabytes, something like that. That's a typical fashion shot in the studio is 2 gigabytes. Yes?
So it's not selecting the capture folder 1 as my session folder?
When you click on that little arrow, where does it go? So then we need to go back to this guy right here. We need to then pick it here. Oh, click on include subfolders. Session folders. So this is the same destination statement as those session hit capture. And then click on it. Good point, though, because I can show everybody that. In destination, in the drop-down, you have other options. You don't have to do it to the capture folder, although that would make sense to me. You can do it to the session folder, or you can select a folder. You can choose a different folder. You could put them, again, someplace else. I wouldn't do that. But at any rate, you want to make sure that you've got enough room to do your capture. That part matters. You would not do the backup here. We aren't going to do that. However, naming does matter to us. And what do you guys have in your name right now? You have what? Image name, and that's it, right? And then what is sitting down in the sample? Is it giving you your the session name? It says untitled job. Great, so it doesn't have anything in there we want. Okay, so to fix that, the first thing you want to do is change the job name so that it actually is the job name for what we're bringing this into. So again, it's going to be the session. It's the one that's sitting right up here at the top. So mine would, again, be 2019-0304 underscore VER underscore C1 Pro Demo. And you can leave it just as that. Then you click on the three little dots that are next to format and you will get the naming window to come up. And we need to actually build this. I'm going to build mine from scratch because you just have image name in here right now, right? All right, so I'm going to erase all of mine and you want to erase yours. These are the format in here, but you guys do have your tokens sitting down here, right? Yep. Okay, so for the tokens that we're going to put in here, we're going to look for job name first because that's going to pick up for the name that we just put in here. So scroll down here and you want to grab job name, H-I-J, job name, and click on the token and drag it up to the top to format and say OK to that. Then you want to put in an underscore. The next thing you want to put in, and again, this is the beauty of why we did what we did all along, is you want to put in destination folder name. Click on that and drag it up. Put in an underscore. And then finally scroll up to the very top. That's where the one-digit counter always is. Click and drag that up to the top and let go. And then click on the drop-down arrow and pick 3-digit counter. And the advantage of doing this, if you take a look at your sample right now, it will actually give you the session name, the 2010304 versus C1 Pro, whatever. But you see your shot count now is put in there because you've got destination folder set. If you use destination folder in all of your naming, you don't have to go through and redo this all the time. When you change your capture folder from shot 01 to shot 02, this will be automatically updated. Make sense? So that's happening here in our import. We're going to do it again in our naming convention as well. So the last thing you will do, and it's this. You see mine right here. I've got a problem in this. If you look at my sample, my shot count is starting with frame 002. That's because, again, I've imported something into this before, and it's remembering that. So it's saying, okay, we're going to reset this at number 2. I can't have that. I've got to reset that part, but that happens out in the import window. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. You'll notice that that same 02002 is sitting right there. Is yours at 001? Yours is at 2 as well? Okay, we need to reset this then. So again, up at the very naming, across from the word that says naming, click on that and you want to reset the import counter. And now it will actually set it to 001. Again, if you were doing multiple cards on this, if you were doing them one after another, Capture One will remember where you left off. So let's say you've got 3 cards and they all have 100 images on it each. You put the first one in, it will name it 1 through 100. When you put the second card in, it will remember that and it will start the naming at 101 and keep going on like that. If for some reason, though, you take a break in this, let's say you import these cards, whatever, and then let's say you actually shoot tethered to this for a few frames, and then you import another card to it, you're going to have to go in and adjust where you want the import numbering to start because that will have been lost. Does that sort of make sense? So it's just, all I say to everybody is the most important thing you can do in all of these namings is look at the sample because the sample will always show you where the counter is actually set. It'll show you everything about it. It'll show you if your destination folder is correct or not, but it'll show you everything about that. My copyright is already correct in mine. Again, you guys should build a copyright really quickly, so do it with me. Hold down the Option key and hit the letter G. These are my files, so give me the copyright. Put in my name. ENGERD 019. We're not going to do any description in this. Our styles we're going to leave at none. We are not doing auto adjustments. We are going to include existing adjustments, anything that's already been done. And then we're going to actually say in this, again, open collection when the import starts. Yeah. You can leave it right there. Or well, let's put it on notify when it's done. And then let's not import all of them. Let's select just the top row. Let's just do 4 of them. Just makes everything faster. So it says the import completed successfully. And again, this is the dialog that you get. Again, you'll notice that nothing comes up because we said to it, we just want you to notify us when this actually happens. And the reason you have those options to set up is that if you are importing 50 cards, you don't want to constantly be taken to the catalog. You just want to continue to import, 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 import. So in that case, you would not have it do anything. But in our case, this is all the importing was done. So say, take me there. And here are our images. And you can actually see they are numbered correctly. They're in the right spot. They're sitting here in this folder number 1. Again, if you click on the capture folder, you see the same thing because this is our capture folder. If you click on folder number 2, that is a completely different animal. Are we good on this? Okay. We're through the library. It only took us, I feel like this is the 3rd day doing this, but it's really only been, anyway, let's not count. Okay, so if you've got a camera, I'm going to ask you to get your camera out now, plug it into Capture One, and let's hope and pray that it'll actually show up and be tethered. Because we are going to actually shoot down. I'm going to turn on the overhead lights so that we've got enough light in here to actually register an image. You guys can still see most of this screen, right? It's not as good as it was, but again, we need something in here. Okay, before we actually start shooting tethered, so just start getting things out and hooked up. You don't need to turn your camera on quite yet. I want to go through a couple of preferences in here because these preferences matter in a huge way, especially when it comes to troubleshooting and tethering issues. So I need everybody, I'll wait till you get hooked up. Say what? Oh. Here. Let me see how this is going to start. And then I'll, yeah. You know this experience well enough anyway, so it's not going to be completely new to you. Okay, so are we sort of good? Again, you don't have to get everything turned on quite yet. I want to look at preferences first. So if you click on your drop-down menu that says Capture One at the very top, come down to Preferences. We need to go through a series of these. We're not going to go through everything in here, but we need to look at certain things in here. So the first one, General. If you actually look at General, you can leave General at its default. You don't need to worry about anything else that's really going on here. You can make certain changes on here, but they're just basic time savers. So for instance, you could enable always open in a new window for your catalog and sessions. I think they actually should have the opposite button on here that it says never open in a new window. That's one to check. That would be worth it to me, but not the rest of this stuff. But anyway, the rest of this other stuff, things here. If for some reason Capture One is not, I'm going to turn the lights off. This is going to take a second longer than I thought. So there is a problem in Apple's world. Apple believes that they really have, I guess, the only software that's actually worth ever using. So what happens a lot of times, how many of you guys do shoot to card? Anybody? You guys shoot to card? And so when you throw a card into your computer, does it automatically go to Capture One or does it go somewhere else? Does it open up Lightroom? Does it open up nothing?
It opens up iPhoto, yeah.
And how annoying is that?
So annoying.
So annoying. And you would really wish that that would quit happening, wouldn't you? So wait a second. I'm going to show you how to get rid of that so it doesn't happen any longer. So I'm going to zoom out of this part really quickly. So simply close up your preferences window. Everybody do this with me, please, because this happens. This is by design on Apple's part. So if you click the application folder and you go to image capture, it's right here. If you double click this and open it up, you won't see anything in here. I'm actually going to turn my camera on. If you had a card with a card reader in it, it would actually show up here. Hopefully, I don't have a card in mind, but hopefully this is going to show up. You see when I turn that on, right down here at the bottom, it says this Canon EOS 5D Mark II. Connect this camera. When this opens, click. By default, iPhoto is set on yours for your card reader. So plug in your card reader, launch this program, and then when you get to this, if you want to pick the application that opens, you select no application. If you want C1 Pro to actually open it, go ahead and select no application here, and we'll set that up in C1 Pro. You can also change this. Again, this is just Apple stuff right here. If you want Lightroom to actually always open up, you set that as a Lightroom preference. And again, you would set this as no application here. So most people will go in because they don't want Apple software to actually open this stuff. So they would simply say no application to this and then quit this, and that problem will never happen again. Yeah, that was worth showing up today, wasn't it? Okay. So in Capture One, if you want Capture One to launch when you actually do that card, again, back up to Capture One to Preferences. In general, you click on this, Open Importer when detected card from digital camera. And what will happen then is that when you put a card in to this, it will immediately, if Capture One is not launched, it will launch Capture One. It'll open up the import dialog. Or if Capture One is already running, it will also open up the import dialog automatically. So again, if you're doing a lot of this stuff and Capture One is the only place you're ever working on this stuff, you definitely want to enable it here. If you've got this enabled in Lightroom and here both, the two can compete with one another, that would not be a really good idea. The next one over is Appearance. This is where you can actually change the way Capture One looks. So again, there's nothing here that's really going to change a lot. We will talk about selected variants and compare variants later, but this is where you can change this to a different, you'll see that now my window in the background just changed to a very light gray or a medium gray, whatever. Typically, I keep this on very dark. It's better for judging imagery as far as that part goes. The next one over, Image. Again, this part doesn't matter quite as much. If you look at this pack as EIP when importing or when capturing, what this is about is that this is Capture One's version of DNG. So what these things mean, you remember I said to you guys before, if you're going to give your session to someone and it has got those sidecar files, the XMP files that are actually called COS files in Capture One, that those files that sit in that extra folder, that if you lose those, you lose any of the adjustments that you've done, all that kind of stuff. These EIPs are actually it's more of a container file that has a copy of your raw file, and it also has a copy of all of those adjustment that XMP data file, and it puts it together and it appears to be just one. So if you want to send a single file to somebody, but you wanted it to have its color correction in it, any exposure corrections you had changed, anything that you had done in software, you would actually pack it as what they call an IP. And if you sent that to them, when they then open that in Capture One, all of those adjustments would be there. Your color coding, your any adjustments that you had made, processing adjustments you had made. Here you'll also see that you can change the default operating engine for the version of software you're in. This is usually the thing that changes the most from program to program. If you click on this drop down, you'll see you can only go back in time. It can't predict what's going to happen in time. And the reason that this exists right here is that let's say that you had done you're a fine art photographer and you've done a gallery show and you had processed out 15 files 6 years ago. And 6 years ago, Capture One 6 was the version of software that existed. And let's say that you had somebody ask you to develop the 16th file and you wanted it to be developed exactly the way the first 15 were. You can't do that in version 9. You would have to go back to 6. You would have to use the engine for Capture One 6. And this is where you can actually find it right here. The same thing happens in Photoshop. There are different versions of Capture Raw that exist in Photoshop. And you can go back and process your files using older versions of Camera Raw. You don't have to use the most latest, greatest current one. Anyway, the rest of this, I would leave it at its default, but the next one over is the biggie. The next one over is this, and this is a blessing and a curse both. And it's the thing that's down here at the very bottom. It's what do you want the software to recognize? So the problem that you run into, a lot of the capturing issues, a lot of the tethering issues that you run into, there's two things that cause you problems. The first one is power. That's always a problem. And the second one is USB. And the problem with it is that the USB that Canon uses is a slightly different flavor than the one that Nikon uses, which is slightly different than the one that Sony uses, which is slightly different than the one that blah, blah, blah. And they've gotten this stuff worked out pretty well. Capture One 11 is working a whole lot better than Capture One 6 ever believed it could work. But what you can do in here is you can go in and you can say, I want this version of Capture One to actually work with all of these cameras, or if you are having a tethering problem, let's say I'm shooting my Canon and I'm having a tethering problem, you can try turning off Sony, Nikon, Leaf, and Phase, and this will say to the program, the only USB I want to support is Canon. Now, that's fine, but the problem with this is that this is sticky. So when you quit Capture One and launch it again, this is still going to be set up this way. And if all of a sudden you go to connect a Nikon camera to this, no matter what you do, it will never connect because you have said right here in the preferences, you don't want it to connect. So when you are troubleshooting a connection problem, this is one of the first places that you go to, because if somebody has turned these things off, it does not matter how much you pray, how many times you restart, it does not matter what you do, it will never connect because you have said you don't want it to. So I'm going to turn all of mine back on because, again, this problem hasn't gotten as bad as it has been in the past. The next thing over in color, we are going to leave color at its default. The next one over at exposure, you want to change these things. So in exposure, what we typically do is we would grab the exposure warning for highlights and drag that down to 250. Why would I do that? Where do I want the limit on my white patch? 250. Where do I want the limit on any highlight detail? 250. So if I'm, say, shooting this card, I think we've talked about this in this class, you can actually photograph things that are whiter than the white patch on this card. I think we've even seen examples in this class, no? White t-shirts are notorious for this. Really bright white furs are notorious for this. Men's dress shirts are notorious for this, white dress shirts. The thing about it is that you could actually have an exposure where this card was reading fine, but where the shirt was actually being flagged. It was lighter than that. It was reading in the 253, 254, something like that, whatever. If you put this warning right here at 250, and you turn on your warnings, anything in your image that is actually above that gets flagged, and so you know immediately where to go to measure. Because if you've got a shirt that's blowing out, or you've got the white top on a car that's blowing out, or there's a stop sign that's blowing out, so anyway, it'll flag it, and you'll say, oh, okay, I need to go measure that area to make sure that my exposure is okay. The other thing that's not on by default is this enable shadow warning. You want to go ahead and add that as well. And then we crank ours up to 15. You would not want to leave that. Again, what I'm looking for here is shadow detail. Now, when we were looking at that card, at that gray step wedge, we said 245 to 250 should be our highlight warning, but that our shadow warning should be in the mid-20s. That is true for a print. That is not true for a screen. A screen, most people are comfortable with having their shadows down here around this 15 mark. You do not want this down at 0, because the problem is that if what you're saying here is, where do you want to flag the area that is got detail in it? 0 is not detail. So anyway, I'm going to crank this up to 15. That's where I leave mine. The rest of this, you can leave at their defaults. The crop, this is strictly showing you, again, the same thing happens in Photoshop. How do you want to delineate the crop? Do you want to see the measurements on it? Do you want to see, do you want to still be able to see a faint part of what's being cropped out? Or do you want it to be just a completely black frame that shows you only the image that's remaining, whatever? We will talk about this more when we get into later parts. There is a focus warning that exists here in in Capture One as well. They will actually show you what part of your images are deemed in focus by Capture One. I don't know anybody who ever's changed these things, and the color by default is this incredibly bright green, and most people leave it that way. The next one over is warnings. You want to make sure that all of these are selected. They are on by default. And then the last one here is update, and this is where you can control two things. You control software here, but this is also where it will register your cameras. Registering your cameras has got no real major benefit that I've ever been able to see. But you know, guys, whenever you turn on a new camera, you always get that dialogue that comes up and says, oh, you're attaching new hardware. Do you want to remember that? This is where it all gets stored, is this part right here. So at any rate, that's what's going on. You can also check for software updates here. You can either turn that on or off. So that's setting up preferences. So then in the camera tab, the next thing that we're going to actually go over, I make some serious changes in here that I want you guys to consider. And again, at the very least, I'm still on that, I'm using, again, the workspace, the simplified tethered capture workspace. That's the one I'm using. But I'm going to modify this right now, and it has to do with a lot of what's going on in this screen right here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of exposure evaluation because I don't believe in it. I don't use it. I use this color card. This thing tells me much more than this. This thing won't tell you anything at all. Again, if you were shooting on dropout white, this thing flags it as being overexposed because the majority of your image is white, and it doesn't want it to be that way. It wants your image to be middle gray. So this isn't a whole lot of use to me. So again, if you click on the little 3 dots that are next to it, you can remove this tool, which I do. The next thing down is the naming, capture naming. I'm going to wait till Haley gets back to go through this part. So we're going to look at a couple of other things right here. Well, I'm not going to wait for her. Never mind. So at any rate, the next thing we are going to get into is capture naming. And again, we're going to treat this pretty similar to the one that we actually did before. Unfortunately, by default, every session that you build will use this capture naming format. And what it does is it's the name of your session with no underscore in there at all, followed by your capture counter, the camera counter. And the camera counter simply is counting the number of times your shutter has fired, usually up to 10,000. When you hit 10,001, your camera counter resets. Which is, there's a whole world of hurt in this. There's a whole world of problems in this. Because right now, if I were to turn my camera on, this camera has shot thousands of captures in it. So my first number in this new session would start in the thousands, which is never where I would want it to be. The other problem that you run into with that is that when you get to frame number 10,001, it resets back to number 1. And if you're shooting to the same session that's already got a number 1, the second number 1 can overwrite your first number 1. So nobody uses this, but this is what they've got on by default. We're going to change that. To fix this, we're going to click on the little 3 dots that sit right out here to the bottom, I mean next to it all. Again, the same window that comes up for doing our naming that we were using for our import comes up here. Unfortunately, it doesn't take that information from our import, but nonetheless, it's sitting right here. So we're going to change this all. Again, we are going to get rid of this part right here. I am going to leave actually a name in here. Again, this to me is a interface mistake. You remember when we had import, this thing was called job name, and now it's just called job, and it's just called name here. So the two naming places in Capture One actually have different names for the same exact thing. So at any rate, we are going to put in name, then I am going to add an underscore under that. We are going to add destination folder, just like we did before. So destination folder name, drag that token in place. Again, another underscore underneath that. And then scroll up to the top to the 1-digit counter and drag this guy in, and then click on the drop-down menu and say you want a 3-digit counter. and then say OK to that. Oh, wait, before you say OK to that, you can save this. If you're working on your computer, you can save this. And again, remember we talked about if you copy your entire application support folder for Capture One, all the things like this, custom names are saved, templates are saved, all those things will be saved, and you simply load those into a different machine and you don't have to rebuild all this naming again. So to do this, to save this, click on the preset that's up at the very top, and you can come down to Save User Preset. And in this case, I would just call it Versa, or call it, name it after yourself, Preferred. And say saved. That's now sitting up here forevermore, and instead of ever having to build that again, you don't have to build that. You'll see I've got another one that got named destination folder 3-digit counter. It does the exact same thing. So at any rate, I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. Then you'll notice again down here in the naming that we've got going on here, I have, first place I look is in the sample. I've got a positive digit here too. This is still sitting at frame number 002. So I need to reset that. So up to the capture naming, drop menu down here, reset capture counter. This thing has now been reset back to 1. In the next thing down, next naming location, again, this is actually set at the right spot. I do want this to go into my shot number 01. Again, the little arrow here will take you out to the Finder so that you can check to indeed make sure that it is the correct one. So again, it's just a good habit to get into doing those things. The next thing down is our next capture adjustments. Now, the tricky part about this is this. At this stage of the game, you need to turn your camera on if you've actually got one. And when this actually comes on, your default drop down here will change. And here, I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to turn mine off. And you'll see here that you really don't have much of a list here. You've got default, copy from last, copy from primary, and it doesn't look like that there's anybody else actually in here. Yeah. So copy from last is what most people will do. But the thing that you need to remember about this that is critical in this is copy from last only impacts the next capture that you are going to do. It does not have any impact on what you have already captured. So this is just saying for your next one, what do you want? Copy from last is actually where we would put it. However, if you turn your camera on, or in this case, you can actually leave this on default. If you turn your camera on, though, you will see that you can get far more specific about this. In your drop-down menu now, you can actually go find your camera model. And this is important, especially in medium format. So and I'll show you what this means. If you come down now, in my case, I'm going to look at the Canon ones first. If you come down and look at the Canon drop down, you will actually see I'm shooting here. This is a 5D Mark III, and if we come and find my 5D Mark III, which is down here, 5D Mark III, you'll see that I've only got one option for this. It is a generic one, and that's all that's actually sitting in here because that's the only one that exists for this. But take a look at this, guys. If you can actually, you can come back to Canon again. If you look at up here at the top at the Canon EOS 1D, the top, their flagship series camera, you can see that there are 4 different possible profiles, and you would want to pick the profile under the lighting conditions that you were actually shooting. So again, you have a daylight one, you've got a tungsten one. Flash would be similar to daylight probably, but still would be more studio oriented. And then portrait, who the fuck knows what that means. But look at the ones for if we actually pick, and again, you would only do this for the camera you wanted to do. But if you come down and look at the phase 1 profiles here, where are you? Phase 1 right here. You will see that their phase 1 backs. I shoot with a P30. So let me find my P30 plus right here. You can see that I end up with a whole series of profiles. I've got 3 profiles for flash that impact the black point. I've got an outdoor daylight one. I've got a portrait neutral. I've got tungsten that also are controlling where my blacks end up being. So you would want to be very specific about the one that you actually wanted. But in my case, I'm going to go ahead and set it as this 5D Mark III because that's the one that's actually happening with this camera. Orientation, you can leave it at default. It will automatically set your orientation, and what that means is that when you're shooting vertically, it will square your images up so that the heads are always at the top. If you're shooting horizontal, everything will be in landscape mode. The reason they give you an orientation default for this is that if you are shooting straight down, it does not know what to do. It does not know what the orientation should be. So if you take your first frame straight down and it's twisted some weird way, you can force the orientation in this drop-down menu right here. But for our cases, we can leave it as it is right now. In the metadata, we would also leave this as the defaults or copy from last. I'm actually going to set mine as copy from last. And all others copy from last as well. So anything that we actually do, so when we set up a frame that actually, it's typically a color card and we get the color balance done and everything else that we want to do to it is done, then you want all the frames after that to actually inherit all of the settings from the one before. And so that's what's actually going on right here. Finally, with your camera turned on, hopefully in this dialog box down here, you will actually see camera, and that part, your camera will actually show up there. Again, I'm going to turn mine off temporarily because we've got two other modifications that we need to make. The first one is that I want you to go ahead and close the camera tab up because I need blank room down here. And for the blank room down here, I want you to hold down the control key, click on your drop-down menu. You want to add a tool, and the tool you want to add is base characteristics. And what base characteristics are is how you reset the ICC profile for the camera. Remember, these ICC profiles that are up here are only for the next capture. If you want to change the ICC profile for the current one, it is here in these base characteristics. Again, I'm going to turn this guy on again, and you can see what actually will happen. Hopefully, it'll actually recognize the base down here. It does have my camera. It doesn't have my profile right here. So again, I would, as soon as you need an image for this thing to actually be on, and we don't have an image on yet. I haven't made any captures yet, so I don't have anything that I can actually change my base characteristics to. The one thing you should know about that, though, is that base characteristics, again, are not permanent. So they are just like adjustments that you would make. Your raw file ignores all of this shit. So what this really has more to do with is viewing on screen and then ultimately to processing. But it really doesn't have, if you can go back in, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you can change a base characteristic after you've shot the file. It doesn't matter as far as that part goes. So I'm going to collapse this and do one last thing I'm going to load in here. Is again, I'm going to hold down the control key or right click on your mouse, add one more tool here. And what you want to add is focus. So there is a new focus that exists in Capture 1.11 now, and I don't know when they added it, but it does exist in 11. And in 11, it actually has camera focus. And what that means is that there are cameras now that talk to this software that allow you to actually change the focus of your lens while you're shooting. That's not what this focus is right here. This focus right here is a screen that will preview your capture and show you a focus check on what you've already captured, which is a completely different thing. Are we all good on this? Okay, so at this stage of the game, you can do one last thing that we haven't really talked about before we actually shoot, and then we are going to shoot tethered here in just a second. And it's this. If you come up to your file menu, because we've done a lot of work to build this thing, right? We've done all these naming sessions over here. We've done our sessions here. We've done naming convention here that's existing in this part right here. We've done all of this shit in here. You can save this as a template. And to do that, you come up to the file menu and you come down to save as template. And then you've got to give this a really specific name. So I would call this my 5D Mark III something like shot 01 through 05 and destination folder naming. Something like that. I mean, you guys get where I'm going. You want to describe what it is, the work that you've actually done to set this thing up. And then where this stuff actually gets set, this template looks like it's actually going to be saved here in my session, which would make sense. I'm going to go ahead and, but it really shouldn't be there. This is not where it should actually go. Where it should actually go is your library, application support, Capture One, templates. And that's where you would put this guy. And save it there. You could save another version of it to your capture folder, so that to your session folder, so that not your capture folder, but your session folder, so that if you move to a different computer, it would go along with it, and you could actually reload that part as well. However, it won't impact the session because the setup of the session has been all memorized in that preference folder. So then, if we go back to the library really quickly, just to show you how this would work, click on the plus, go to New Session. We're not even going to bother to name it, but in your template drop down, you'll see that it's sitting right here. And if you were to click on that and then give it a name, whatever, it would build your session favorites right here in your capture folder. It would build the structure that you've actually got built here. However, I'm going to cancel out of that, and we're going to continue here on with this. So if I'm looking at session 1, I mean my shot number 1, that's where I did my imports. I am going to go to my shot number 2, and I am going to make this the capture folder now. So again, I'm going to click on this, say set as capture folder. I'm going to go back now in my camera tab. I'm going to check my renaming part up here to make sure it did pick up the session 2 folder, so it's got it right here. And we are actually ready to make some pictures. So I'm going to turn on the lights. So I need everybody to get their camera fired up and connected. If you've got a color card, all the better, whip it out. If you don't worry about it. And then I'm going to take a picture of this room. I'm going to take a picture of the back of the room. So if you guys are in it, don't worry about it. I'm going to set it on Zoom so that hopefully... Okay, and then I'm going to just guess. What do you think the exposure in this room is? Okay, I just lost my camera. Okay, so it says my camera is not attached here. What do I do? This is the problem everybody in the world has. Here's the first thing to do, and I need everybody, if you don't take anything else away from today, take this away from today. Come up to your Apple menu. I need everybody to do this with me. Come down to About This Macintosh. A dialog box will open up. You want to click on System Report. Under System Report, come down to USB. And in USB, you should see your Canon camera. And if you don't, that is telling me that it is a cable problem. It's a cable or camera problem right here. But it is not, my computer is not seeing the camera. This is where I would see it would actually show up here. So I'm going to turn this guy off. I'm going to turn it back on. You need to then not reset it, but you need to get it to rewrite this. So again, I'm going to click out of that and then do a system report again and click on USB. And I still don't see my Canon. I've got a big old error message on my screen right here, on my camera blinking right here. So when you get into that, I've still got this error blinking thing, which I've actually never seen before. Pop out the battery, count to 30, turn your camera off. That wasn't 30 seconds, was it? And here you see Canon digital camera. So now I know that the problem is not my camera, and I know it's not this cable. It may be Capture One, but in Capture One, it's actually showing up here again. If it does not work, still, the way to actually do this is turn your camera off first and then turn it on, leaving Capture One running. If that doesn't work, turn your camera off, quit Capture One, turn your camera on, and start Capture One. If that doesn't work, you mix up the order. So if that doesn't work, you would, again, quit Capture One, quit your camera, start Capture One first, and then turn your camera on. You got to try all these permutations, but that's the only way of actually going about doing it. So at any rate, I'm just going to guess in this room. What do you think the exposure in this room is? What's the guess? Anybody? Oh, come on. There's no adventure. There's no risk taking in here. There's no gambling in here. I'm going to leave it at an ISO of 800. I'm actually going to take it wide open at about 1/4 of a second. You guys can take a picture, whatever you got going. So has that camera ever attached before? No. We need to look through all the menu parts of it. So don't worry. We'll just get together. You and I need to get together at some point and go through that, because you've got to go through all the menus to make sure that it is set to do this. Okay, and I didn't get anything here at all. So, there we go. All right, so how far overexposed am I? What's a lot? I'm going with 3 stops. What's 3 stops down from f2.8? You're cheating, all of you. Count it out. What's 1 stop down? f4, 2 stops. 5, 6, 3 stops. f8. You guys have to know your f stops, damn it. They're going to keep showing up on tests, so you might as well just know that. Okay, that brings me on to, I'm still like probably 2 stops off. What's 2 stops down in shutter speed? I'm at 1/4. An 1/8 would be 1. A 15th would, an 1/8 will be 1. A 15th would be 2. So it seems like pretty good in here as far as this part goes. However, remember we said, so you guys need to take pictures and make sure that your camera is actually working, and make sure that it's actually putting stuff into the folder that it is supposed to be in. So if you go back to your library and actually take a look at it, is this going in shot number 2? Yes, they are going in shot number 2. Is it being named correctly? Yes, it's being named correctly. But again, I'm here on this 3rd capture right here. I'm going to actually put my warning on. You remember I told you guys about that warning? So this is showing me in this red area the part of my image that is actually being blown out. That's reading as 255 back there. Is that the exposure that I want? No, that thing is real. Look at all the holes in it and the thumbtacks in it and all that kind of stuff in it. That should not be blown out completely white. So what I typically do, and again, this is a dangerous move, but I respect each and every one of you. You guys are going to listen to what I say and not let this bite you in the ass. If you come over to your exposure slider, which is the thing that looks like the little mountain, and you click and you drag it down, what you're waiting for to find is where that actually begins to go away. And you can see it begins to go away when I'm down about a stop or so. Now, you don't want to leave this exposure down at a stop, because that will then give you a completely false reading for what the numbers are that you're getting out of this. You need to reset this to 0 and then go back and change your camera so that you're stopped down another stop. Yes?
How did you get the highlight?
Again, I clicked on that it's the little warning triangle right here. This is the thing that we set up in our preferences. So in preferences, the thing that we set right here under exposure, where we said we wanted to be at a 250 here, that's what we were actually looking at. So again, I'm going to now click on this. Actually, I just stopped down a stop. I'm going to click on this again. And you can actually see this is down probably about where I would actually like this to be, because again, I'm losing the darkness on everybody else. So it's a balancing act in here. You can see that all of this area that's tagged in blue is all falling below my threshold. It's actually down below what I set is that 15 mark. Is this making sense to everybody? So are your captures coming in okay? Okay, I need everybody now to go back to the library, and I need you to set your session number 3 as your capture folder. So again, hold down the control key or right click on your mouse, set our session number 3 as the capture folder. Go back to capture naming in the capture adjustment dialog box. So again, in the capture naming, look what has happened. And I've told you, I can't tell you this enough, that the settings for the capture counter are sticky. So it does know that I'm going into session to my shot number 3. It picked that part up. It knows it's going there. It's changing that part of my name, but it is not changing this capture counter. My capture counter here is ready to go for frame number 5 because I've already done 4 captures for my my shot number 2. So again, you need to come up to the little 3 dots that are along the top. You need to reset the capture counter. This goes back to 1, and now you're actually ready to go. Although this is not picking up my capture folder. This is still showing me 02 because it's selected here. If you want to see 03, click on your capture folder. You'll actually see it's empty because 03 is empty. And then again, back to my camera. I'm going to change it slightly so it looks like a slightly different picture. And you can see now, again, this is named correctly. I'm starting in shot number 3, starting with 001. I'm going to do another frame of that, 001. Are you guys with me on all this? Then I need you, shoot.
How did you get the red highlights?
It's this little warning check guy right here. If you click that, it goes on. If you click that, it goes off. The other one that you need to know about that's right next to it, to the left, this is your focus warning right here. And you can see that when you click on that, it's actually focused on this chair right here. That's what's actually in focus. If we go back to shot number 2 and click on the final frame in shot number 2, this is what's in focus. Actually, the bottom of your chair is in focus. Right in this area is right in here. What's interesting is it's also thinking that the very background is somewhat in focus as well. I would never be carrying the depth of field from that chair all the way to that back wall, although it's saying that part of that is actually happening. Makes sense? Finally, I need everybody to come back to shot 02, and I need you to, again, hold down your control key and set this as your capture folder. So you remember I said this because this happens all the time. We will shoot in the studio. I'll do my first shot of the day, the first outfit. We think we're done. All our first picks will go up to the creative director, art director, creative director. They will look at it, and if they're not happy, they'll come back and say, you need to shoot more of that. I didn't like the way the hair was on that, or that was the wrong pair of shoes on that. We need to actually shoot more. So we're going to come back to session 2. So I need you guys to all go back to session 2 again and set that as your capture folder. And then click again on your camera. And then again, check out the naming. And you'll see that it's ready to start naming this frame number 03. You've already got a frame 03. You've actually got 4 frames in here. You need this to start at frame number 5 to continue your series. So to do that, you go to those same 3 little dots, click on that, and you want to set the capture counter, and you want to put in the number 5. And say OK. And now this sample is correct because again I've got 1 through 4 sitting right here, and now I can go back and reframe this and continue shooting the way I was before. So one last thing to possibly think about in this. Now when I look at this, it says to me that my, again, I'm worried about my detail right here. You can still see that I've got some blowout that's actually happening in here. the final thing, again, for me, this is a compromise. Do I want to hold detail ultimately in that background right there, or do I really care about holding detail in faces and that kind of stuff right there? It's kind of, I'm sort of like, I'm trying to, what's the phrase here that I'm going for? I'm trying to split the middle here, right? I'm trying to keep as much exposure as I possibly can. I'm compromising. That's what the word that I was looking for here. I'm compromising. One of the things that exists in Capture One that's actually it's an amazing tool that I think it actually works better in Capture One than it actually works in Photoshop is high dynamic recovery. So it doesn't exist here in either the capture, it's not here in the library, it's not here in the camera. But if we go over to the next one over here in our exposure folder right here, you'll also see it's not in here either. We can add it here. As a matter of fact, we can add it anywhere. You remember we had a custom menu before? Let's go ahead and add a custom tool tab. So up to the very top, custom tool tab, hold down the control key, click on the drop down menu. We're going to add a tool tab, and we're going to do the one at the very bottom, custom. And I'm simply going to call it Verser. And I'm going to leave it as this number 1. And I'm going to click on it to say go ahead and add it. It shows up blank because there are no tools in it. That's done by design. Then again, click on your control key. Come down to add tool. Tool tab, add tool. And what you're looking for is high dynamic range. And when that high dynamic range comes in, you'll actually see it here. You've got a highlight slider and a shadow slider. So the way you want to use these is you want to turn these highlight warnings on, and then when you actually click on your sliders and start to pull them over, you see it change in real time, and you don't want to go one step more than you absolutely have to go. So I'm up at a hot 48 here. I've now recovered all of my highlights, but again, this is a software fix. If I was truly shooting this and this was the scene that I wanted to be shooting, you damn well can be sure I would be putting lights on you guys to raise the level of your exposure, or I would be dropping the level of the lights on the background so that I did not have to do this in software. This is a fix after the fact, and that's nowhere near, that does not replace good lighting. Does this make sense? Are there questions about any of this? We can do one last thing back in the tab here. I'm going to zero this back out again. In my tab right here in the back again, you remember it said when I put on my, I'm going to turn off my highlight warning. I'm going to turn on my focus check is on, and it's actually saying, I'm actually going to go to my, back to my shot number 3. You guys need to pick something that's actually got something that really is in focus. So I'm going to go back to my shot number 3. It's showing me these guys. It says that this chair right here is in focus. I'm going to click again on my camera tab to find out if it's in focus. Click on the little eyedropper or the magnifying glass right here, and you can actually click on that chair, and you see it puts it in your focus check window, and this will then tell you exactly where it should be. So finally, as a digital tech, when you guys are shooting, especially tethered, the focus is going to be the single most important thing. If you're in a studio and you've got your lighting down and you've got your exposure down and you just want to make sure that that focus is always going on, you don't have to keep tabs anchored into this palette. Come over and click on your focus window and just grab at the very top. You can drag this thing out. You can actually make it much larger. Then you can cover this tab like this so that you can watch your normal screen right here to make sure that the images are capturing the way you think they should be capturing. But this can be set on somebody's, so in an image of a person, what makes it in focus or not? Anything. Who in here shoots people? Right? What makes the image of a person in focus or not? There's only one thing. The eyes. That's it. If the eyes are in focus, your image is in focus. If the eyes are soft, your image is soft, period. I don't care what you're shooting. I don't care what else is in the shot. It does not make any difference. It is all about the eyes when you're doing people. Now, product is a different issue, but the eyes, it is the people, it is the people. For the people, it is the eyes, the eyes, the eyes, the eyes, the eyes. And that's it. It's the only thing that matters. I'm telling you this. People will look at an image where the garments are, this happens to me all the time. Garments are tack sharp because some photographer was too stupid. They put their camera on auto central focus, which looks right at the stomach of a full-length person and focuses on that, and their eyes are in front of that. So the focus is actually back focused. So the only way you know is to actually put this. So this is how we typically set up a screen situation. In a bigger screen with bigger real estate, we would have a gigantic version of this focus window so that we didn't have to keep moving it around looking for the eyes. It would actually be there all the time. But then you could still make sure that capturing was going on behind it, and that if there was a light that went on, if you've got strobes going on, and let's say there was a strobe on the left-hand side that went out, you would be able to spot those things. It's just typically the way you would actually keep this part going. Does this make sense? Okie dokie. Are there questions about any of this? Remember I said to you really quickly, it'll be the last thing that we actually do here. I'm going to put focus back down where it actually came from. Remember, it just locked into this my camera part right here, but you can move these things around. I'm simply going to collapse focus and drag it back down to the bottom. Remember, we were talking about base characteristics, and it's sitting right here. So the base characteristic is the ICC profile that has been tagged to this raw file, and you can see that it is the correct one. It is this Canon EOS 5D Mark III. If for some reason this was wrong and you had to fix it, you click on this drop down menu, and again you would have a whole series of profiles right here. So let's say that this was really a 5D Mark IV, not a 5D Mark III. You could come in here and say 5D Mark IV and change it here, and that will actually change the profile itself. However, this is not the wrong one, so I'm going to change it back. And I think that has got us. Oh, one other thing. Live view does exist on these cameras. If you actually click on this, it will open up a window that actually fires up your sensor and gives you live view. Now, different cameras can do different things here in live view. The Canon cameras, for the most part, don't have a whole lot of other stuff that they can actually do to them. But you will have, like on some cameras, again, they will allow you to actually focus your camera. Some of them will allow other things. It'll allow you to do other things. For the most part, what people do with this thing is they actually make the screen bigger. And they actually use it to actually do still life stuff. Is where most people use the stuff. And they'll use it to focus stuff. I personally don't find this especially productive in working with 35mm stuff. But if you're working with view camera, and if you're working on a camera that like in the studio when they actually connect the medium format camera backs to the 4x5 bodies, it's the only way you can actually focus. There's no way to actually visualize that part any other way. We talked about other things here really quick. You can, in your camera view right here, this eyedropper tool will white balance your image. So here I'm going to actually set mine off to something wrong like that, and then set it to something correct again. This is similar to this one that's up here at the top, but it's not the exact same thing. This one that's at the top will actually pick white balance. What this one does down here that's actually in the camera is there are camera bodies that will actually take this information and it will upload it to the camera body as well. So not only will this set this for your white balance, but that information is then transmitted to your camera, and your camera then records and shoots with that white balance the whole time. So that's why they've added another one down here. Another great thing to check is this thing right here that says RAW, just so that you make sure that you are shooting RAW. And something that has come up in a number of classes, not this one, but how many people in here are shooting the medium format camera backs? Okay, there are two versions of RAW for those medium format camera backs, just like there's two versions, there's four versions of RAW for this Canon. And what they are is they're conventional RAW, and then there's smaller ones. On the medium format backs, they're called IIQL and IIQS. The S stands for small, the L stands for large. Photoshop can read the large files, but the only thing that can read the small ones are Capture One. So if you make a mistake and you set your settings here, and it happens right here in this dialog box right here, if you set your RAW setting to IIQS, Camera, RAW, Photoshop, Lightroom, none of those things can read that file. The only thing that can read it is Capture One. So just be aware of that. And not only that, it actually makes your file a lot smaller. It makes it a quarter of the size, and that's a resolution hit. It's a quarter of the resolution. Okay, it's a lot. Are we good? Are there questions? All right, next week, guys, we're going to meet at the studio, and I will see you then.